waited a long time for this moment, my little friend. Now you will experience the full power of the dark side. Not with anything to say about it. I have. Your arrogance blinds you, Master Yoda.
So, we're going to talk about Avengers End Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 3 The Walking Dead. Jamie.
Mate, what's it called? Why have you done that to me?
It's called The Long Night.
That's it, yeah. Oh,
there you go.
Is night spelled with a K?
That's a great little reference. Well done.
Imagine.
Starting off strong yet again.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. I'll ask you first then. What did you think of the episode? General impressions.
General impressions of the episode. That's really tough. As I was watching it in the moment, I enjoyed most of it. And as I've let it sort of fester, I like it less and less.
Yeah.
When I say in the moment I liked it, I didn't like the first half at all, and then I started to like the first half of the second half of the episode. So basically the third quarter I was really getting into, and then I didn't like the final quarter. So
that pretty much lines up exactly with my feelings on it as well.
Right.
My thoughts. Yeah. In terms of like when I was at a high and when I was at a low. But in general, I was pretty low throughout the whole thing.
I was pretty low.
I was pretty low. Yeah, when watching it.
Right.
Now, you see, this is going to be... We can't really go into it scene by scene in this, can we? Because it does all flow quite well as an episode. Like, it is hellish. So, let me see. Should we start off with talking about the tactics? Just to get this out of the way, the plan, right?
Sure.
Get this done and dusted so we can actually move on to characters and stuff and story and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I suppose we did speak last week a bit about how the dialogue relating to tactics and strategy didn't actually make sense in terms of anything specific. It was just lip service to the fact that something was going to happen next week, essentially.
Yeah, although it should be noted that we said that purely on the basis of it feeling as if that was the case. It wasn't based... That hunch wasn't based on anything evidential at that point. It just felt that way based on how the dialogue was written. It just felt shallow and hollow.
Exactly, yeah, good point. Okay, so... Alright, so I'll just give a bit of context here, right? I... Just to back up what I'm about to say to some extent, right? In my life, I've studied history for a total of 9 years, right? 6 years in secondary school. Everyone does that, so that's nothing special. But 3 years in university, I studied history, right? And in that time, I did a lot of medieval history. So I know a bit about tactics and stuff. And then in my spare time, I watch a lot of videos and read a lot about medieval warfare and weaponry, right? So I do kind of understand a lot of this stuff. Not in any great detail, but I have a good general overview of it. And it made no sense. Like the whole setup on the defensive point of view makes no sense. And I'll just bring up the Dothraki first, the cavalry, right? So mainly in medieval warfare, cavalry are used for mainly
Dothraki are well known in medieval times.
Well, they're based on the Mongols, I suppose. But anyway, like cavalry are used for three main purposes. One is scouting, right? But the show doesn't really do that anyway, and it never really has, so that doesn't matter, right?
Okay.
2 is charging the flanks of the enemy, and this isn't primarily to like smash into them and devour the whole army. It's to cause chaos and make them like break ranks essentially, and run. And then the third is when they actually chase the stragglers and mop up anyone who has run, right? As a result of that. That's what cavalry are used for. What they are not used for is charging headfirst, not only straight into a line of infantry, but into like somewhere with no visibility, pitch black, towards an enemy they know will not break because they don't have emotion, towards an enemy who they know if they die they will become part of that enemy. So it's futile leading a suicidal charge against it anyway, because it'll only cause more distress for the people behind you in other ranks. And you could write this down to, you could argue that okay, they're the Dothraki, they've just got kind of like a morale boost, I suppose, from Melisandre, and they're bloodthirsty savages anyway, so maybe they're just hyped up and they just charge in, right? Yeah. That's fine. But Jorah and Ghost go as well. So that kind of falls flat on its face then. Well, they had to get rid of Ghost somehow. Oh, that's what they were thinking as they wrote that. Yeah. Oh, Ghost. Poor Ghost. Okay. I mean, it should also be noted here that during the interlude between recording last week's session and today's, you sent me a link to another chap on YouTube who discusses tactics and things like that, specifically. Matt Easton. Scholar Gladiatoria or something like that. Scholar Gladiatoria, yeah. Matt there Easton. We go. So we'll link to him as well, so you guys can go and check that out, because his tactics videos are really informative and really interesting. Yep. And I watched that, and I was like, wow, this is, like I just said, really interesting. And it would be really handy if the makers of Game of Thrones hired somebody like that to, or even somebody more qualified perhaps, or I'm sure they've got the money and the budget for it, well, we know they have, to give them some advice about medieval battle tactics. Yeah, it wouldn't be difficult at all. Not at all. Those kind of people abound, and loads of them would love to have that opportunity. Yeah. And not only would that make, let's backtrack a little bit here, because Game of Thrones is to many the realistic and grounded and gritty fantasy show that we've never had before. That's what it was. That's what it was when it came along. When in the books, when George wrote battles in the books as well, that he clearly put a lot of thought into how these things played out, and a lot of research went into real life history. Yeah. And in the first few seasons, when they did go into tactics, they either borrowed from the books, or it seemed like they were interested or bothered about those elements being portrayed in a realistic and believable manner. So if the show had always been this way, like it was, where tactics were just completely nonsensical, then it would be it'd be easier to swallow, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's taken this this backwards sort of route essentially into, and sort of devolved into nonsensical tactics, that even I haven't got any historical knowledge in terms of battle tactics, but even I was thinking that can't be right for a bunch of Dothraki people to go charging in like that. Yeah. It served no purpose. Yeah. Anyway. And there was loads of stuff like that. There was loads of stuff that, like, in the video that we just briefly mentioned, Scholar Gladiatoria mentions about how it would be a good idea to hold up inside the walls of Winterfell. Yeah. So even ignoring that, even if we say that they can't all fit inside Winterfell, right? Fine. Even that, if they have to be outside, it still didn't make sense the way the tactics were portrayed. Yeah, you mentioned about why didn't they just light the that trench,
earlier.
it should have been lit from the start. Like,
Yeah.
one, it gives visibility. Two, I don't know what they're planning to achieve by lighting it at that moment anyway, as a trick, or like, haha, I gotcha, or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And yeah, the Unsullied in front of the trench, why put them behind the trench so that they can actually use their long polearm weapons, their spears, to kill the dead when they're actually already encumbered in the trench? You know, it'll be a lot more effective.
God.
Yeah, just everything.
That is.
And
Yeah.
why is the artillery, why are the trebuchets at the very front, on the front lines? You put those behind. If you can't have them behind the walls, you have them behind all the troops, because you want to protect that, and they need to be flinging stuff constantly. It just, doesn't make sense.
It just strikes me a little bit of, I hate to use the word, but sort of arrogance on the part of those who were involved in the writing of this, that they would, or maybe the direction, I don't know how it worked in terms of what was planned from a writing perspective and what was executed from a direction perspective, but I would hazard a guess that it was to do with the writing, and a sort of a sense of, wow, we know what's best kind of here. And I think that's a massive shame that they haven't utilised the skills and knowledge of those either around them or those whom they could quite easily get around them.
Yep.
So yeah, tactics was the first thing that you noticed, and it plays a massive part throughout the episode, doesn't it? So
yeah,
and it's quite interesting that we felt that those words between Brienne and Jamie in the previous episode felt hollow without knowing for a fact that they were. Because had Brienne, for instance, turned up on the right flank because it had good ground in this episode, at least that would have been a line that made sense. So not only did the words in the moment feel hollow, not only did the tactics themselves not make sense, but the words that they actually wrote down in the previous episode not only weren't relevant, but were seemingly just wrong, to be honest. So even if it had been relevant somehow, that's not what happened. So I don't really understand why they bothered writing that. So it's quite easy when piecing together a script to look at the next episode and see what the characters that you've written do, and then say, well, I can see you're doing this, or I can see you're doing that, rather than make up random battle tactic words and then have them not even do those very things. Crazy.
Yeah, insane.
So, but yeah, I mean, I thought from a spectacle perspective the episode was, really good.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Yeah.
Beautiful cinematography. And here's what I said to you afterwards. My expectations of Game of Thrones have lowered. So I was able to enjoy most of the episode on the basis that my expectations were different now. And it had basically set itself up as this kind of Avengers-esque show over the course of the last 2 episodes for me.
Yeah.
You weren't as disappointed by the last episode as I was.
I wasn't. Yeah, I was fooled. I'm going to say it like that. I was fooled because I bought into the idea that the show was on an uptick. It was going back up to at least some of the heights it had once stood at, based on the last episode, based on the last 15 minutes of episode 2, pretty much. And plus that, in addition, with all of the hype and comments from like the director Miguel Sapochnik saying he took a lot of influence from Battle of the Helm's Deep, from Two Towers, all the cast and crew, showrunners, writers hyping up this battle as the biggest thing that has ever happened in film or TV in terms of a long continuous battle.
Yeah.
I was completely taken up in that hype, and I shouldn't have been, because it's probably made me feel more negatively about the episode than I would have been if I had tempered my expectations like you had.
Yeah. You see, for me, the previous episode had done a fair bit of, and I even used the word Avengers-esque, anyway, so it kind of set me up for that feel. And they're clearly more interested in having characters in the right place, on screen, doing the right thing at the right time. And when I say right, I mean I don't mean right for the story, I mean right for what
Fan
they
reaction.
can. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what can. I mean, I'm probably being slightly cynical, but it does have the sense that they think what will evoke the strongest fan response online.
Yep.
About the writing now, and that's why they have Arya flying 10 feet through the air and stabbing the Night's King.
Oh God.
I mean,
Yeah.
I almost don't know where to go with this, because it's all, the whole episode, as you say, was sort of all over the place. But I just want to briefly say the reason why I liked the third quarter of this episode was because not only was it, I thought, stylistically brilliant in terms of some of the shot sequences were really, really strong.
Yeah.
There was a sequence where Jon is back and forthing. There was a sequence where Arya is kind of having a little Jurassic Park moment with the...
I was going to bring that up. the raptors. Yeah.
Yeah, with the raptors, yeah. There was just a lot... There was a scene... Okay. Now, this is both a positive and a negative. It was positive in the sense that when I saw it, it was a positive. It was a negative in the sense that no consequences came from it. The sequence where it sort of passed all the various characters, and Brienne and Jaime and Sam were like all like basically really
They're about to be dead.
about to be dead. They were all in complete turmoil, and Jon was sort of looking at them as he passed through.
Yes.
And the moment where Jon looks at Sam and he sees he's in this complete horrific situation, and Jon isn't able to do anything.
Yeah.
And it's not only that he isn't able, in a cliched Hollywood movie, in that moment he would have gone over and he would have knocked them all off him, and it would have been the saving day moment, and he didn't do that because there was other stuff going on, and that to me felt organic and realistic.
Yeah.
So all of that whole sequence, I had hope for this sequence being like the old Game of Thrones, where we don't know what's going to happen. We really think, oh my God, we're about to lose this guy, or we could lose them, or we could lose all of them, and it's only happening because of organic events that are taking place during this sequence.
Yes.
But instead, nothing happens. Like, not an exaggeration, nothing. Like, so we see 50 whites clambering all over Sam's body, and then, as you said in our WhatsApp chat, the camera cuts away, it comes back to him, and he's all right. And not just not just Sam, but Brienne and Jaime,
everyone,
all of them. Yeah. And it wasn't even that was the moment where they all collapsed dead. That didn't come at that point.
No.
So yeah, so that's why that whole sequence, that third quarter was like, wow, this is really powerful now. Stuff's happening, and this could be like the Red Wedding moment. It felt really nightmarish for a period of that episode. Like,
it did.
Yeah, like nightmarish is really the word that I want to use.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when the dragon with the ice fire is kind of like, and lots of stuff was happening, and it all felt, oh my God, this is scary.
It's like you can't keep up with it all. It's like it's a sensory overload, pretty much.
But in a good way, not in like a Transformers like.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean
robots
that. Yeah.
throwing each other, and it's just like, oh fucking hell, my senses are being raped, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't not like that, in the sense that you're in the war zone here.
Yeah.
In the sense that like Saving Private Ryan or a really good war film would portray a war scene. It was like that, and on top of that, the nightmarish element of you know how scary these things are, and we could lose these beloved characters. So that third quarter was like great, perfect. If you were to isolate that third quarter, but then it's just the fact that it comes to nothing essentially that makes it completely consequenceless.
It's so strange, isn't it? This whole 7 seasons of build up about this threat has amounted to nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Like, what impact has this had on the overall story?
That's the main. We had that fear coming into this episode.
We did, that it would be dealt with within one episode, and then what's left? Cersei and Euron. What? It's it's almost, that pacing is so weird. It's almost like, if you think of Return of the Jedi, right? They kill Darth Vader and the Emperor in the first 20 minutes, and then the rest of the movie is them going after Jabba the Hutt. It's like, what? It's just completely backwards and weird. Yeah,
totally. And the thing is here's where it gets a bit muddy, because if you were to broadly say what the interesting parts of Game of Thrones, you might say that they were the politics and they were the historical type medieval-esque moments, i.e. the Game of Thrones.
Yes, not the high fantasy magic stuff.
Exactly, and the high fantasy magic stuff is kind of like a byproduct of this world.
Yeah,
you might say that, but first of all, that political intrigue is gone anyway from a writing perspective. So it's as if they've reduced the show to words in inverted commas, like politics and like fantasy.
Yep.
And then they've dealt with the fantasy now, and now they're dealing with the politics in the next couple of episodes. And they're not real politics anyway. They're not politics in a way that's believable, historically accurate, realistic from a character motivation standpoint. So in what sense are they politics? They're only politics in the sense that we will know who sits on the Iron Throne and what Cersei does. Like, that's not what people mean or what they meant, and it's as if they've misunderstood why people fell in love with the show. And you can reduce anything to these things, but the fact is the show has built up a lot of various things and then not paid them off in any way whatsoever. Well, I'll give you another example. In today's episode, what was the point of the whole Melisandre in previous seasons, or in the last season, saying that Jon Snow might be Azor Ahai?
I don't know. They don't use Azor Ahai in the show. It's the prince that was promised, I think. But they do bring it up, and okay. And didn't they bring it up in relation to Daenerys as well? Yeah,
they brought it a couple of times over the course of a couple of seasons.
It's like, okay, that obviously means nothing.
It means absolutely nothing.
But so what was the point in addressing it in the first place? Like, you can make a point to have characters indulge in prophecy and dreams, and then have it be a revelation that it is meaningless and means nothing, but that's an in-world thing.
Yeah.
This is from a writing perspective. They've just disposed of it.
Yeah. They've just forgotten that it existed.
Yeah.
And you can see furthermore, you can see how the cogs work, because in this case, the sort of the manifestation of those elements would have been things like Jon Snow killing the Night's King.
Yeah.
And instead what they did was they chose to have Arya doing it and we know this due to the inside the episode on the internet, for no reason other than, what was it?
She seemed like the best candidate, provided we weren't thinking about her in that moment. Hopefully you forget about the fact that Arya Stark ran out of that castle with the battle drums playing and going towards some purpose, and we don't know what until it happens.
We hope to kind of avoid the expected, and Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but it just didn't seem right to us for this moment. We knew it had to be Valyrian steel, to the exact spot where the Child of the Forest put the dragonglass blade to create the Night King, and he is uncreated by the Valyrian steel.
It is very possible that the same thing that created the Night King is the thing that was necessary to destroy the Night King, or maybe it's Valyrian steel, or Figure it out for yourself. Not gonna say.
I mean, you might say that in isolation, that sort of thought process isn't wrong necessarily.
No.
But it is when the motivations and things like that aren't really apparent, and instead you've just got the manifestation of actions and events and the choices being made by the writers. And it's almost as if you can see at every single point what the writers have written in you know, on a piece of paper, as opposed to, I mean, as you said as well, it's as if they've thought of events and moments and they've contrived
scenes to fit those.
Yeah.
I have to bring up something now in relation to Arya killing the Night King, because in the episode they've tried to tie it back to her season 3 scene with Melisandre as if it was set up, when it wasn't. Like, that's not what they intended back then, because no, it's not. D&D said in this Inside the Episode that 3 years ago they decided Arya would be the one to kill the Night King, right? So apparently, according to them, that decision was made 3 years ago. That's after season 3, okay? Arya has that scene with Melisandre about the blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, whatever, in season 3, which was 2013, would have been filmed in 2012. They made up that scene for the show. This did not come from George. Arya does not meet Melisandre in the books. So they came up with that scene in isolation. This is me speculating, in isolation, just so they could think up something later on down the line. Maybe they wouldn't come back to it. Maybe they would. No, and then they've just, I mean, they've contrived this retroactively. Then,
I mean, the line is at the point at that time, in my opinion, was clearly written to
faceless men.
To make the point about her being a faceless man.
Exactly.
There was another moment there where Melisandre said about, what did we say to death, not today. And it's like, what are we doing here now? Are we are we just plucking lines from various people that people might remember and harking back to them for no reason other than it's a nice little moment? Like, okay, we've established that Melisandre knows what other people have said, because we've had that with Jon Snow and, nothing Jon Snow, and when she said that, and
another Red Priestess that says the same thing to Varys. She knows stuff about him. Yeah,
but here there is no purpose for it other than like in the moment, when she says it to Jon Snow, she does it for a reason. She says it. She says, nothing Jon Snow, to show him how much she knows and how much she understands.
Yeah. In
this moment with Arya, it's just like a little moment. It's just a thing. There's no reason for it. What are people meant to think by that? That she's Syrio Forel? I don't get it.
I don't know. I can see what they want people to think, but it still makes no sense. What they want people to think is that Arya's whole journey over to Bravos to train with the faceless men who worship death has all been leading up to her ending death, or this manifestation of death, who is the Night King, and the god of death. And that's why Melisandre says, what do we say to the god of death? And Arya's like, not today, because she's going to kill him, and that's her destiny. But that's not Arya's story. It hasn't been set up.
Yeah, it's just randomly been set up in that moment, essentially, because
it's Bran and Jon's.
Okay, the whole Bran thing makes no sense. It makes no sense.
I don't know where to start with Bran. Well, I get confused every time I think about him.
Well, he shouldn't be there for a start. Like we've established, I think we spoke about it on the last episode, there's no reason for him to be there. And I don't mean that in a writing perspective. I mean that in a sort of a in-world perspective. He should still be part of that tree, basically, for a multitude of reasons, but one of which is that it doesn't make any sense, sort of in-world lore fantasy, that he just sat there zooming in and out of various things. I mean, how does his skill work? I don't even get it anymore.
I know. It's not. It's never really been explained properly, and if it has, it's not consistent with how he acts and how characters interact with him.
Like when I was writing a screenplay a few years back, and I had a superhero character, and in the first draft there were too many things that he could do that weren't explained what he could do or why he could do them. Yeah. And that was a common note from trusted screenwriters who I showed the script to. That was one guy writing his first screenplay, sending it out to a few other screenwriters, giving casual feedback, and it was quite a common bit of feedback, and yet the way I wrote it was still made way more sense than what Bran does. And this is two really accomplished writers, or more than two, for one of the greatest books ever written, for one of the most popular TV shows ever made.
Yeah.
Like, what does he do? How does he do it? Like, you don't need to tell the audience all of these things, but you need to know, as a writer, how these things work. Yeah, and they don't know how those things work.
Exactly.
And you can tell they don't know how those things work because they change the rules whenever they feel like it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And why does he randomly zoom off? He goes, I've got to go now. And then he just goes into...
For like the majority of the episode he does that. He's gone.
Where?
Into ravens. He goes into those ravens, but why?
But why, yeah.
What's he doing?
So I think the in-world explanation for that was that maybe he was leading the Night's King towards him.
Yeah.
In order to have Arya kill the Night King there.
Okay.
But if we are now to believe that every time he does that, Bran can just lead the Night King wherever he feels like it, as you pointed out, why didn't he stay north of the wall in the first place?
Yeah. Which
would have made more sense anyway, but that's by the by, because I'm not sure that makes sense that he just leads the Night King wherever he wants anyway. So, and also I thought having his mark was more than enough to lead the Night King.
Yeah, I thought that was like
that's
a GPS signal on him, pretty much.
Yeah. So why is he zooming in? And it's not even explained.
No, like it's been established the Night King already knows exactly where he is at all times. So, what's he doing? What are John and Danny doing? What
is everyone doing? They're all over the place in random places, doing random stuff for no reason.
Dave and Dan said that when Daenerys sees the Dothraki being wiped out and like she flies off and then Jon follows her, like that's her ruining the plan, because they were supposed to wait for the Night King to go to the Godswood and then ambush him. But like, what? Like, are they just going to sit there? I don't get that. They're just going to sit up on that cliff and not take part in anything ever, on the off chance that this other guy, who hasn't been seen yet, turns up in this specific place. What? And
Daenerys was meant to be the one to light the trench as well, wasn't she? But
yeah, but I didn't see it.
I don't even get the point of that. So
yeah, why?
Yeah,
just have the trench lit already.
Well, yeah, or even okay,
or even have people down there light the bloody thing.
Yeah. What? Yeah. I mean, what? Why? What? They're just having her as a fire starter. Like, I don't get it. So yeah, I mean, going back. So yeah, this is why I enjoyed the third quarter again, because there was all these things happening that were dropping these little seeds, so to speak, about what could happen and how devastating this whole sequence could be, and then none of it comes to happen. The first half was full of the things that didn't make any sense in terms of what people were doing.
Yeah.
The third quarter had all these events that were being built up, and then the last quarter had none of those things happen. So what we had was one quarter with promise, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the fourth quarter it was as if they just gave up. Because it just felt like the show set up a lot of situations to then have no consequence or effect. So we've already gone through the whole sort of brand thing. Like, we don't really understand that whole thing. That third quarter that I just spoke about, the reason why it felt like such an important sequence was because it set up these sections with Sam and Brienne and Jamie where these could have been defining moments in the show. They didn't have any effect. They had no consequence. They had the Whites break through, essentially no consequence. They had the crypts, which had been heavily foreshadowed, no consequence.
No.
We had the ice dragon, which was this huge thing at the end of last season. It's only served one function, which was to bring down the ice wall.
Yeah.
It served no other function than that. In fact, we saw it blowing fire at a tiny wall that Jon was hiding behind. And he was protected by this tiny little wall.
Like, that's not how fire and heat works, but okay.
Yeah, well, but we'd already seen him, the ice dragon, destroy walls.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it was they showed one element of how the fire works in that same episode,
and then contradict it immediately.
Yeah, he just hides behind a little ledge.
And then he gets up and shouts at the dragon.
Yeah, what was that about?
I don't know.
What did he shout at it?
Yeah, it was just a wordless yell.
Oi!
Yeah. Oh God.
And also not only all those things, but as you rightly pointed out, that we had the snow fall at the end of last season in King's Landing. And not only did that obviously come to nothing, but we now know that the rules appear to be that the snow literally follows the White Walkers. So how does that even make sense? What were they thinking when they wrote that?
No idea.
So they must have just been thinking it will be cool to end the season with snow falling. And that must have been what they were thinking, unless they had another plan and it didn't materialise that way. But I doubt it. I really think that they just thought this is a cool moment. I think that exemplifies their whole rationale. And we have example after example of that line of thinking. We have the Dothraki charging into the darkness. Not only did you highlight how that doesn't make sense from a tactical perspective, but it was just something that they saw as a cool moment.
Yeah. Because Melisandre lighting up their Arax in the first place. I mean, it's cool, but
why? Yeah.
And what were they going to do in the first place? Because they weren't Valyrian steel or dragonglass.
Yeah.
They were just regular Arax. So was the plan... What were they going to do before she showed up? Nothing, because what happened was the first thing they envisioned in that scene was Melisandre lighting up the Arax, and then they built the scene backwards from there without having it actually happen naturally.
Exactly. And they've sort of given away their line of thinking by how obviously they're doing these things. Because there's no other explanation for them other than the stylized perspective.
Now, and the thing is, on the surface level, like the stylized perspective, this episode in particular was incredible, right?
Yeah.
Stylistically, it's amazing. It's beautiful to look at, like production design, sound design, editing, everything. It's
some amazing music.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the music was
that
really
was part
good.
of the reason that basically why that, as I keep on mentioning the third quarter, that third quarter was just carried by some of that music and those shot sequences.
Yeah. No, incredible stuff. Like the fact that this is in a TV show, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when you scrape away that thin layer of like glossy dirt on the top, you see there's absolutely nothing underneath anymore.
There was something else I wanted to bring up. Hang on.
What was it? Was it Beric Dondarrion dying in a Christ pose?
Did he die in a Christ pose?
He didn't die in a Christ pose. He blocked the way for Arya and the Hound to run down the corridor a bit, and he was very much so in a Christ pose. And then he died. I don't mind that. It's not subtle at all, but fine. He was always kind of a prophetic warrior character anyway, so fine. You can indulge in a bit of that imagery if you want.
Actually,
Makes sense.
there was some sequence that was during the sequence which I was actually enjoying. Actually,
Yeah, I love that. I really like that whole sequence where I'm not sure about Arya sneaking around the library, to be honest.
Yeah,
I thought that went on for a bit too long, but it didn't seem to make sense with how the whites were portrayed before. But
yeah.
no, once she started running and Beric and the Hound entered the picture, I loved that sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I preferred that because just prior to that sequence, we saw Arya jumping around like Yoda, like, and I was thinking, so you had like a year with the Faceless Men training to be a silent assassin to like be a Jedi, like just jumping around like I didn't see how it all made sense really. Like,
no,
it didn't make sense to her character. I didn't really get it. It was like, and then the next sequence was her in the library, and I thought, okay, at least this is in keeping with what your training was primarily about.
Yeah.
And even again, it feels like a sequence that they'd envisaged, and then they wanted to see it. Like all of it felt like that. It felt like they'd envisaged the sequence, and then they figured out how to put it in.
Yeah.
It felt like a lot of it felt like music videos, like really, really well directed, huge production value music videos. That's the sort of feel a lot of the episode had, where you just splice together lots of really high production value music videos.
That's a good analogy, actually.
But there was one bit just prior, I think it was just before that. Yeah, it was just before that, where the Hound was really struggling, essentially, with what was going on.
Yeah.
Now, it was done well, and I can see why they were doing it, but for me, it was again as if they'd forgotten what the Hound was afraid of. Because during all those flashing imagery, if you go back and watch it, it's not really the fire elements that's bothering him. It's just the fact that there's lots of shit going on and kicking off. And it's like, I'm not sure we've established that the Hound is, going to be particularly bothered by that.
No, because especially because he was one of the Avengers who went north of the Wall last season. Yeah,
why is he suddenly the one that's afraid of this stuff? If it was a lot of fire going on at this point, and then we saw him overcome his fear of fire at a vital moment, might be slightly cliche, but at least it brings a completion to that arc that he had.
Yeah, on that point, my brother and I, when we watched the episode, had the exact same thought, that when Beric threw that sword to save Arya, the Hound would then pick it up, and that would be him overcoming his fear. Like, he'd have to pick it up to do something, to defend her further or something. That would have been a nice little moment.
Yeah.
That would have been a great opportunity for him to overcome that fear of fire, but no, didn't happen.
No. Again, it was as if they'd forgotten what his fear was, and instead they were like, what's he afraid of again? He's just scared of these things, isn't he? So he's like they literally forgot what his character was.
You literally have to look at his face and you know what it is. There's like a permanent mark on his face of what his fear is.
But during his shell shock moment, it was just portraying the imagery as if he was afraid of all the commotion.
Yeah, the editing suggests it's the commotion. Yeah. Yeah. This is like literally film 101 stuff. It's the language of filmmaking tells us.
Yeah.
It's not the fire, it's the commotion. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, we've kind of ripped the whole thing apart, but I mean, one thing I will say before we sort of finish off is when season 1 started with this whole thing of the main characters, anyone can die. It kills Ned Stark.
Yeah. Even though that's the wrong way of looking at it, but
it's not. Yeah, I accept that it isn't as simple as anyone can die. There's more to it than that. It's basically things that should happen will happen, kind of thing.
Yes, and more often than not, the characters who die are undone by their own flaws.
Yes, exactly that. So, but from a sort of a viewer's perspective, you're watching that first season going, oh, please, the main characters can't die, please. In that sort of way.
Yeah.
And then now what we've got is we've got the inverse of that, where we've got the characters who should die, like in terms of the situations that they're building and creating, such as Sam, which we spoke about earlier, and Tormund, and all these people who should have died, aren't dying. And then on top of that, it forces you as an audience member to go, the main characters should be dying here, so I can't really get behind these moments because it's not ringing true.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not want the main characters to die, but if you appreciate good storytelling,
you need to feel as if they can.
Yeah. Now there was a lot of this episode where I felt like I knew exactly what was happening at every single point. I didn't feel, as I say, that's the only reason why I like that third quarter, because I felt like anything could happen there, and then none of it came to pass. But during the earlier sequences, I never felt like anything unpredictable could happen anyway. Like I predict everything that happened was like, well, that wasn't a surprise. Like, for instance, when Melisandre comes up and she puts her hands on the trenches and she starts casting a spell, it's like, why are you dragging this on? We all know the trenches is gonna be set on fire.
Oh, that bugged me, the way she's really slowly walking up to it as well. It's like, run, hurry up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this would have worked in earlier seasons if we wouldn't have known whether it was going to work or not. But that's because you can imagine the same sequence playing out in season 3 and it just not working, and then them having to do something else instead to because that's how it used to work. That's how the whole show used to work. So it's when I mentioned earlier about creating situations and setting things up to then have no consequence or effect, like the things that I listed earlier, like the snow falling in like King's Landing, like the ice dragon, blah blah blah. It isn't just that, it's storytelling methods, it's storytelling devices that they set up in the earlier seasons, which they've abandoned now. They set things up that they've completely just gotten rid of.
I watched I can't remember what it was now. I watched a video on YouTube recently that described this really well and succinctly. So in the earlier seasons, all of this stuff was characterized by causality, so it's cause and effect.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's set up and payoff.
Yeah.
Over a much shorter space of time as well.
Yeah, that's so true. Set up and payoff. Yeah, it's like we said with the ice dragon, set up at the end of last season, paid off now. And no, actually, it paid off.
It paid off at the end of last season.
Yeah, that was the payoff.
Yeah.
So the most satisfying payoffs are when they've gone for seasons and seasons. But the problem is we're not even getting the payoffs from those earlier seasons anymore.
Exactly. And as I said, they tried to force one of those with Arya killing the Night King, but it's quite transparent that that's not what they were initially planning for back then.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of Melisandre's actions, and to a degree, Theon's character arc is basically a sort of payoff.
Yeah, I like Theon.
Yeah, that's a reasonably good character arc overall. I quite like that.
Yep.
But yeah, everything else pretty much it's either quick setup and payoff, or it's a setup earlier on in the show that they either forgot about or pretended to pay off in a way that clearly wasn't their intention.
Yeah. No, where do we go from here? We're halfway through the season. The Great War, as it's been dubbed by characters, has been dealt with.
Yeah.
It wasn't much of a war really, but okay. So where do we go from here? Cersei and Euron. Okay.
I don't really care.
No, neither do I. And again, as you said earlier, it's not because we don't care about the political side of the show, because that is what we care about most.
Yeah.
But the writers have disposed of that.
Yeah.
Cersei and Euron aren't involved in the political sphere anymore. They're just another enemy to defeat.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's just not, yeah, they've just created more enemies and Cersei's gone. She's reverted back. She devolved as well into sort of 2 dimensions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually a real skill to spend 4 seasons, maybe 5, making a character fully 3-dimensional, and then to have them lose one of those dimensions.
I feel so sorry for Lena Headey, to be honest, because I think she's one of the best performers in the show as well.
Same.
Like we mentioned Nikolai last week. Lena is great as well. Like, and for her to have such a nice, well-rounded chunk of work for 5 seasons, and then after her walk of shame, for all of that to just be reverted into nothingness. It's such a shame.
Well, her story arc will now be completed with something that you can see being, put behind a bullet point. So it will be something like she sets something on fire, or she gets set on fire by Daenerys, or it's something that's
Jaime kills her, while also dying at the same time.
Yeah, something like that. These moments no longer have resonance in a way which makes sense or is organic or feels real or natural. They're just plot points that have been written down on a piece of paper in big writing, and then they have to get to those plot points. But yeah, I mean, the problem I've got now is I'm not really interested. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not really that interested anymore. And I had a little bit of hope remaining, I guess, for this episode. But I didn't expect it either. I mean, one thing I will say about today's episode as well, that the Night's King just centering everything on Winterfell makes no sense for a lot of reasons. Or if they were to center everything on Winterfell, it made sense for them to just continue marching in this kind of autonomous...
Yeah.
Wipe
over it, pretty much.
Yeah. And it would have made sense if they'd have, the people at Winterfell had have retreated and kept moving back, and if it was like this travelling battle because everything was being swamped.
Like the end of Return of the King, when the army of the dead swamped Minas Tirith.
Yeah.
The Green Ghosts, except that over a large amount of ground, pretty much they just keep sweeping forward.
Yeah. And they have to keep retreating, and it's just wiping people out, and there's people, we're seeing our main characters just being wiped out. And one final thing is that Jon's riding of the dragon, to me, it still feels so unearned to me. It just feels like he now rides a dragon. Like, that's what he does. And like we would just expected to just buy that at the beginning of this episode, because we saw him ride on one once. Like, why is he a dragon rider? Where's this come from?
Now he is a dragon rider.
Yeah.
Why? Because Kit Harington picked up the script and that's what it said. So he is. Speaking of scripts, do you think Conleth Hill and Peter Dinklage mixed theirs up at the start of this episode or something? Because Varys says, "At least we're in a crypt." I'm like, that's a Tyrion line. Yeah. That's not something Varys would say.
No. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Well, they've forgotten what Varys is meant to do now, so...
Yeah. He's totally pointless.
Okay, we've got to stop just moaning.
We've got to stop. He's pointless until he reaches whatever bullet point they have set up for him in the last 3 episodes. He has one more thing to do, and that's why he's hanging around nonsensically for so long. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder what that one last thing will be. Whatever it is, it'll be something really sly, because think about all the character traits that you would write about Varys, and it will be a manifestation of those character traits.
Which haven't been demonstrated for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And the same will be said for Tyrion. He's really intelligent and clever, and again, haven't been demonstrated for ages, but he'll do something that we're meant to think is all those things. And or they won't do anything, and they'll just be stood there talking to each other and Daenerys like they do in every episode. Like, that's also plausible. So who knows?
Who knows? We shall see soon enough.
We shall. So yeah, if anyone is interested Have you got any more points, Kian?
If I get any more points, no. Overall, I think I've said all I need to be said. Like, we didn't mention individual scenes of characters dying or anything, but I don't really think we needed to be honest. Although I will say we didn't mention it specifically, but since we've criticised so much, I'll briefly bring up something I loved. I did really like Jorah and Daenerys fighting together and Jorah dying. I think that had the potential to be really cheesy.
Yeah.
Especially when Daenerys picked up the sword. I was thinking, oh no. But she was really clumsy and she only used it like in defense. She never like used it, you know, she never lashed out. She only used it when like someone broke past Jorah or something. I know, I bought it. It was I thought it was quite an effective little sequence.
Yeah, I mean there were actually some sequences within the whole episode that I bought within their isolated moments.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Like that, and like the one with Beric and the Hound and Arya. You know, like the whole sequence that followed Jon. I really bought that as an individual sequence.
Yeah,
it was really well directed and stylish episode, and so there was a lot of good about it from a visual perspective and from a directing perspective, certainly.
Yeah, it's just not that cohesive as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it. And
Yeah.
now our watch has ended.
Yeah, so again, we'll be back to speak more about Game of Thrones. We'll also be doing some other videos and talks and maybe sort of take on a more analytical perspective, more review-minded perspective on a couple of things over the next few weeks. If you enjoy listening to us or watching our videos, then please do comment or give us a like or subscribe, as we would really appreciate that. The more the better. Please do check out that chap that we mentioned earlier, Scholar Gladiatoria. What is he, Kin?
Scholar Gladiatoria.
Yeah, I don't mean disrespect when I can't say his name. I just can't say it. As he informed us of a lot of the tactics, and he's much more proficient in that area than I certainly am, and probably slightly more than Kim.
Well, way more than me, yeah.
So yeah, please do check him out, and any other links that we can think of we'll whack in the description too.
Brilliant. Bye.
Bye. We never know how to end it.